Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we're going to be talking about why even have a spiritual practice. So this is a VR, Why Spirituality, to Astral Tarot Lady and her unasked for VR to Lennon. I will make sure that both of those videos are in the description box below because they are both very good and they bring up a lot of interesting points. Now, excuse me, I have been sick almost all of October, trying to balance getting well with mothering a toddler, with teaching workshops and working with clients and all the things. My voice probably isn't back to normal yet, and I have my warm drink to get me through this video, but I think that this topic is really fascinating, and I think that it's a good discussion to have, and I thought that it would be a fun way to get back to filming videos because I've been doing a lot of, behind the scenes stuff and working with teaching and things, but not so much being able to create content here or on Instagram. So I thought we'd start with this. So the first prompt is, how were you raised? So I was raised Christian in a primarily Catholic home. I went to the, Catholic version of Sunday school all the way through confirmation within the Catholic Church. But I was not raised in a strict Catholic home by any sense of the imagination. My mother was very open to how we felt about God, and the conversations always were around love and not judging people and those types of things. When she had a falling out with the church after I was confirmed with the Catholic Church over their marriage annulment divorce process, especially that still applies to you even if you're not Catholic when you get married, she did not wish to continue going to church, and she felt, I think, probably pretty betrayed by the church. And she really set the example for me, though, at that point, that you don't need the church in order to have a relationship with God, and that the church isn't always right, and that you don't always need to do what they say. So I like to call it sort of Christian light. Like, yes, I was raised in a Christian home, but not in a strict, overbearing type of a Christian home either. So the second prompt is, what makes you want a spiritual practice? So I always wanted to understand God. God as in this bigger concept. I wanted to know who God was. I wanted to understand him. I wanted to know why there were so many religions around the world that couldn't seem to get along, even though from my child perspective, we were obviously all worshiping the same God. We were just calling him something different. And now, of course, I understand there's a lot more nuance to the conversation. But as a child, I literally just didn't understand why it wasn't that simple. But as I got into high school and then college and just life kind of happened, any type of spiritual Christian tradition that I had sort of fell to the wayside, but I did study religious studies in college. So I was a psychology major. I also have a biology minor, and I have lots and lots of religious studies courses under my belt as well, because again, I wanted to know why, and I wanted to understand God, and I wanted to know what all these other religions were. And so it started with a comparative course, it was like 101, like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, like it was one of those courses. And it was so eye-opening, and I loved the professor so much that then I took her Women in Religion course, where I learned about Mary Magdalene and why we can't have a woman priest or a woman pope and all the things. Because it was still very Christian-centered, that particular course. We did touch other religions, but it was primarily Christian-centered. And then I took courses on Hinduism and comparative Eastern religions, and it was so eye-opening for me to see and understand all of these different religions and all these different teachings. And Hinduism was, in fact, the first religion that I studied outside of sort of, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which I'm not trying to say are the same religion by any sense of the imagination. But Hinduism, to me at the time, felt so wildly different from anything I had studied before. And it was so eye-opening for me. So I have a huge respect for the Hindu pantheon. I've talked about this a little bit before on the channel. I have just massive respect for the Hindu pantheon because it was so eye-opening for me. So even though it's not my home pantheon or when I work with regularly, I have massive amounts of respect for it. But I never developed a spiritual practice. This was all cognitive, research-based, and, biblical scholarship-based. Until my late 20s, when I did sort of discover my own spirituality. I went back to working with the Mother Mary and praying the rosary and things like this. And then when we had a very sudden and very traumatic loss in my family, my spiritual practice really kicked itself into gear. And I think that's the story for a lot of us. A lot of us have like a really challenging, some people call it a heart-opening experience, but like a really challenging something, that a tower moment for my tarot readers, that just comes in and tears down all the illusions and all the things we thought we knew, and we are just searching for something that we can cling to, and our spirituality comes through then. So while I had studied Mary Magdalene heavily in college, this was when I also found Mary Magdalene Revealed, Megan Watterson's book. I took that book on a camping trip with my husband. I read it in 3 days, and it completely changed my life. So again, even though I was very familiar with Mary Magdalene and her story historically and things, that book put words to something I had always felt but never knew how to express. And so I had just kind of put it in the closet with, like, I'll get back to this at some point in my life. And that book absolutely changed the entire trajectory of my life. And one of the things that it did for me was it gave me permission, for somebody who was still holding on to her Christian roots. It gave me permission to step into other realms of spirituality, because it showed me it wasn't really that different. That maybe, perhaps, what Jesus had come to teach the world wasn't really that different from what all these other traditions were saying. And I was already well past believing anything in the Bible if Jesus hadn't said it himself at that point in my life. So at that point, I sort of took on the label of mystic, because it was the only label that felt like it fit, the one where we're trying to get to know God for ourselves, to get to know the divine through direct experience. And at that point, it is, at that point, that's what it was for me. It was all about getting to know the divine, and again, getting to know the truth, which is different than like the one truth as Christianity would have us believe. I wanted to meet God. I wanted to meet all the other gods. I wanted to meet the angels. I wanted to meet the demons. I wanted to get to know everything. And that was how I found, angels can be terrifying and demons aren't evil, and I really found my own spiritual path. So the third prompt is, what myth drives your practice? So over the last 2 decades, as I've been doing my own Christian deconstruction and working with beings in a variety of pantheons, I have really circled all the way back to many of the Christian beings and many of the Christian myths. So I would not consider myself a Christian at this point, but my path has become about reclamation. It has become about reclaiming the things that were supposed to be ours that the church stripped from us. So it's about reclaiming Mary Magdalene, reclaiming Lilith, reclaiming Eve and Asherah, reclaiming the demons, reclaiming myself through all of these beings and their stories and the parts of their stories that were stripped away and hidden from us and distorted. All right, so the fourth prompt is, what is it you do with your own spiritual practice? So my spiritual practice relies primarily around journeying with my guides. So in meditation, journeying with them and doing shadow work to do deep healing from current and past life wounding, letting go of societal conditioning, these kinds of things. My spiritual practice is very based around healing, reclaiming my humanity, and becoming whole. And I do that primarily through journeying with my guides, reading tarot, of course, a lot of journaling, and then learning how to integrate that into my daily life so that my spiritual practice isn't something that just happens at the altar, but also happens in day-to-day life. And that is the hard part. The easy part of a spiritual practice is to sit at your altar and talk to your gods or your guides, to pull tarot cards, to work ritual or sit in ceremony. That is the easy part. The hard part is then taking it away from the altar and integrating it into your day-to-day life. And it is something that I'm constantly striving to do better at. And it's hard because humanity is hard. Like, being a human is hard. I have a toddler. Just last night, he woke up in the middle of the night. I think he had a nightmare. So my husband and I are exhausted. I'm still recovering from being sick. We both run our own businesses. My son was born on Halloween, so his birthday party is coming up this weekend, and all the things. And it can be really, really hard. But my spiritual practice being very much revolved around, you know, for example, Mary Magdalene's gospel, and you know, it's probably her lens with which I look at the rest of the myths and stories that guide my practice. But the goal in her gospel is to be fully human and fully divine. And when we talk about the concept of sin, we're looking at sin is about missing the mark. It's not some huge transgression against God. It's perhaps, you know, you acted from a place of only ego, forgetting you were also a divine soul. And that can be really, really hard day to day when we're dealing with our own wounding, our own triggers, our own epigenetics, our own sleep deprivation, and of course, whatever wounding and triggers and everything that the people in our lives are carrying themselves. So it can be really, really hard, but I think that is the goal. Like that's what I do, is I try to do the things on my altar and then take it out into my daily life. And then the last thing is, what keeps you on this path? So for me, what keeps me on a spiritual path is that I see the changes. I see the changes in my life. I see the changes in other people's lives. I believe very much that humans are meant to be not just a physical being. So we have, of course, our physical body and our physical health. We have our mental health, and we have our mind. And then we also have our spiritual health, or our spiritual body, or however you want to, whatever tradition you follow that, you know, sort of breaks these into separate things. But when I'm looking at healing and I'm looking at humans and human behavior and humanity in general, I tend to look at all three of these things, and I look at us very holistically. And when we are leaving out, for most of us, when we are leaving out the spiritual part and we're just treating ourselves like a physical human body, or just a physical human body with a mind, we are leaving a huge piece of our health unattended to. Our mental health, our physical health, and our spiritual health are equally important for most of us. I would never make the claim that everybody is here on earth to like have this big spiritual experience. I think we're here to be human, but I see the difference in me. I see the difference in the people around me. I see the difference in my clients. I see the difference in people when we are walking a spiritual path that is in integrity and in alignment. And I see the changes that it can make, and I see the tangible changes it can make to your life. So that is why I stay on the path, even though it is very hard. And, you know, I don't think it's something we have to do every day. So for example, October, I've been very sick. I haven't done much on my spiritual practice this month, right? And that was good, and that was okay, and that was necessary because I needed to rest. But I can also feel myself becoming more reactive, becoming less embodied, becoming less present without my spiritual practice as well. So that is my little rambly response. I hope that you found it interesting. I'd love to see if you do a VR. I'd love to have you link it below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.